Any form of intensive study requires a good deal of solitude, but learning is never a solitary endeavor. It's always done in community. And one of the most influential communities for most of us is our families. Now, as the son of a polyglot yourself, as someone who's tried to raise sons who are polyglots, can you speak a little bit to that? Is there such a thing as a culture of polyglottery in a family? Is it helpful? Is it harmful to have that background for you personally and for anyone who's listening?
Wow, that's a very interesting question. Thank you very much. I guess I have thought of that obliquely, but not directly. But I do think that, yeah, there are family traditions of, and particularly in learned families and scholarly families, when you have children growing up in homes that are full of books. I've only experienced my own home, which was a home full of books in lots and lots of different languages. And that is what always rubbed off on me from my father. And when I think back to my childhood, he never actively tried to share anything with me or force it upon me or say, let's do this. But it was just always there. There's just, I just remember when I was a child, babysitters would come over and they would be confounded by these books on the wall. What are these? What are they to look at? And so there was something about language learning that seemed strange to most people that was just absolutely normal and common to me. So I think that that's something that we do inherit. I know that my father got his love of languages from his mother, and I got mine from him, even though he didn't directly share it with me. It was just in the air. And then I did try to share it, I suppose, more actively with my own sons by homeschooling them and teaching them and making everything I had available to them and just being, willing to work with them when they wanted to do it and hoping they would like what I found interesting, but not necessarily expecting them to follow in my footsteps. So I guess I've noticed that across the board, that there does tend to be a tendency to value learning and scholarship and study and the habits that are necessary with that. I mean, like I say, my father didn't actively try to share languages with me the way I did with my son, but he didn't hide it from me. And I also inherited from him this tendency to wake up very early in the morning. And so in my teenage years, I just have these images of my father sitting at the kitchen table. He'd always wash his hair in the kitchen sink, put a towel around his head, and then you just sort of sit there and he'd be, reading Catalan poetry or just, or Bengali verse or something. He'd just be reading aloud in various languages. And to me, that was a norm. I don't know how many people think it's normal to see your father sitting with a wet turban around his head at 5 o'clock in the morning reading Bengali poetry, but to me that wasn't strange. And if you're going to develop the ability to read and enjoy literature, I think in any original language, it does take, like you said, those many hours of working in solitude to get up to the level when you can do that. And a model, I think a family model of somebody who is there to show that kind of introverted spending of time, that ability to engage a text in front of you in your own mind and sit there and be absorbed in it for a number of hours and to find that fascinating and not get frustrated by the things you don't understand, but to become enamored of the things that you do understand is something that it's hard to teach. I've been a professor most of my life, and you try to inspire your students to do what you are interested in and to give them a positive role model. But I think that kind of thing, patterning, takes time, takes years, takes growing up with.
Now, you kind of alluded to this with your last point, but our relationship to the models and the norms set to us by our families tend to be somewhat complicated. Sometimes we aspire to them and we just go straight after them. For many people, sometimes they don't want to aspire to them. They want to do something else entirely, and they end up coming back to it eventually, or they end up not coming back to it at all. So for you personally, was that norm you saw, was that something you actively aspired to? Was the polyglot inheritance something that came down cleanly or smoothly? And regardless of your answer there, what's some advice you can give to your listeners about the passing on the polyglot inheritance?
Yeah, thank you for that too. Yeah, one of the one question I get a lot is from parents of other people interested in homeschooling their children, wanting to pass languages on to them. And often they don't really have these languages themselves. And so my first piece of advice is get that language. I know you think it's valuable for your child to learn a language, but how are you going to, impose that upon them unless you're actively engaged with it as well? So I think that parents who do that do provide that kind of model. And whether it's direct or indirect, it's reflecting on my own life and experience, which I have now sitting here, at age 60, reflecting back on my experience as a son, as a child of my father, and now as a father, as the father of my sons. And I do see a difference there in that I did actively homeschool them and actively encourage and teach them, whereas he did not. I went to a normal school, and like I say, he didn't actively push that upon me, but I ended up doing it thus far. I don't know. My sons aren't that old yet. Maybe they will go more into languages or other things than I am. But I guess in me, in a certain way, the fact that it was a little bit withheld, a little bit, sort of kept a secret. It's kept something that, okay, this is what I'm doing. You can watch me, son, but I'm not going to say, hey, come do this with me. Come work on me. Made it kind of alluring. It's a time in my adolescence when I guess I would say I felt intimidated by my father's linguistic prowess because I struggled with French in high school, and I tried to occasionally. I already developed a love of German literature and Spanish literature as a high school student. And I tried to look at some things in the original, and whenever I would try to say something in the original, he would not very kindly sort of correct my pronunciation, say, oh, I didn't understand it. You pronounce it this way. It was just sort of, I had this feeling that this is his realm and I daren't touch it. And then I went to college. It's like, okay, I'm away. Now I can do it. And I started studying languages and I loved it. And then he was happy to share it with me. Then it was something we had in common. Then it was something that, we did together. So we had a complex relationship. You're right there, very much. Sort of, trying to, conversely, with my sons, I raised them speaking French to them because we happened to be in circumstances where that was auspicious and it was something I could do, and it just sort of fell into place. And it was, more, hey, we're spending our summer in Russia, so let's learn a little bit of Russian. It's just something more actively that I tried to do with them. And so I think it can work either way. I think, I look at, the effect that it's had to see a role model and be able to pattern yourself on it, and just to know that it's out there, and to sometimes, yes, come about it in a roundabout way, and sometimes sort of go at it more directly.
So to revisit that last question then, to people who want to have a culture of language learning in their families, your first advice, as you said, was learn those languages yourselves. And then is there anything else you'd add to that? That would be my first piece of advice. I do get people saying, I want my child to know Spanish or Chinese or something because it's very valuable, and I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to do that. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, do you know this language? And would you be willing to do that with them? I think that shared experience is of utmost importance. And then I guess I would say that if it's possible to cultivate in your heart a feeling that this is not just valuable, this kind of learning, this kind of studying, but that this is truly important,
that you are doing this for your child, not because you think this would be a plus, that a good skill to have, but it's because it's something you love. I guess that's the biggest difference. I noticed that often in Alliance Française in Singapore and Dubai, when I took my sons there and was in classes, and they were with children whose parents usually spoke French, one or both of them, and the teachers and the parents sometimes ask me afterwards, it's like, we noticed something. Your sons are like, they're okay staying in French. They're okay speaking French. They don't automatically switch to English when everybody else does. And there was this sort of desire of the kids to feel that this world language was the stronger language, and this other language that was kind of being pushed at them through this Alliance Française, and the parents was somehow in a position, and the other kids resented it. And I think it's because those parents felt it was important. It was their language, they were proud of it. It was their heritage or something, but they didn't love it the way I love French. They didn't come to it like with a desire that this is a fascinating and beautiful language and the beautiful literature. And I think that thing is there too. So I guess that would be my second piece of advice. Not just learn the language with them, but love the language with them, love it with them, and sharing love is so much more effective than just sort of pushing, here, you need to do this. So I guess that might be my answer.
Okay. With all that in mind, to go back to the question that you probably get a lot, and admittedly on the surface, this question sounds like it's just a question of optimizing which languages a child should learn, right? What's the ideal starter set of languages for a child to learn growing up? Is it French? Is it going to be Chinese? Whatever it is. From what you've said, it sounds like whether the parent loves that language is a little bit more important than some of the other factors. Is that the case? Or is there a sort of priority list of languages you'd recommend to people who might have children and want to teach them languages as they grow?
Very interesting, very interesting. I would say that, again, it's obvious that, Spanish is in the United States is the second most important language. There's multiple opportunities to use Spanish. It's a much more valuable skill to have to know Spanish than it is to know in the United States today, than it is to know German or Swahili or Sanskrit or anything else. It's something you can actually use and have with you. And so if that's important, again, the parent should do that as well, not just think, oh, this is important, the child needs to have it. So much said about the importance of Chinese in the economy. It's a very hard question to answer. I mean, here we are sitting in a room full of books. I mean, for a scholar, who's somebody who's very interested in Russian culture, Russia is obviously going to be very important for somebody who's interested in other things. So it depends upon background, it depends upon heritage, it depends upon sort of a judgment of languages. But if you wanted, somebody here is truly interested in raising polyglot children, I think it's perfectly possible to, if you have a language that you can command relatively well yourself and you love yourself, that would be your starting point. So presuming that your starting language is English, and then you have a strong command of another language, I think that would be the language to pass on. And then just to look at, I think children do have an ability to learn languages broadly if they're very young. So if you have very young children, and you can do what I did, forge an international career. You don't need to live in one country your entire life. If you truly want to share this with your children, take them and let them live abroad. Let them be exposed to other languages. There's not a great number of impediments to doing that. So if you're very serious about that, I would say that would be a step. Look into places where, I think the problem that most people have with learning foreign languages is that it's a foreign idea. It's strange. It's bizarre. It's not something they encounter. It's not something that crosses the mind. If your mind is totally habituated to being monolingual, why would you think of putting a whole other system in there to get your thoughts articulated? So I think that, raising your children in some sort of an international environment, some sort of area where they can hear that other languages are spoken, and it's not strange to think in other languages and use other languages, and where they can become interested in them and see the value of them for themselves. So that, cultivating that sort of environment where the children could be reared to hear that, an international environment, an international school, taking them to international countries. And truly, I think that my sons would probably confirm that places that we live that are Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, is not a traditionally Arabian culture so much, but it's a truly international culture. You can know people from all over the world. And so when you come from a place like that, you grow up in a place like that, you're just habituated to hearing many different languages. It doesn't seem like a strange thing that's incomprehensible to you. And so if I look at my sons, I have one who's going more in the direction of sort of straight languages, and the other is more going in mathematics and physics. That's a language too. But he's also, thinking about Akkadian and Babylonian and learning Spanish because it's interesting to him and doing stuff like that. So it's just something that it's not a strange thing. I think cultivating that overall mindset where, if you, as a parent, if you can have a bookshelf and you can have language learning books and the children feel free to come and say, oh, could I borrow this? It's nice to, as parents, we want to encourage learning at certain times, sort of, get them doing this. But if you just can make it available, they can come take it and you're amenable to helping them when they do. I think that's what we can do.
Perhaps as a final question, then, we've spoken already about this notion of a polyglot inheritance, something that gets passed down. My question here is about, suppose there's someone listening today who has been monolingual throughout their life, has only recently been convinced of the importance of language learning, maybe through interacting with your videos, with your language academy, wants to be able to pass down language learning to their children, but is in a position where they're not going to be fluent in another language for some time. They're not in a position to move internationally just yet. How do you, to a person like that, what's your suggestion for how to pass down polyglottery for, say, the first time?
It's pretty simple. I would say really bite the bullet and learn the language with the child. The child's not going to judge you, And so if you're at least in a position to get a tutor, somebody to come and speak the language with you in the house and to be there and doing it actively. So you might not know Japanese, but if you want your child to know Japanese, learn Japanese with your child, get a tutor to come. And when the tutor comes, just be the engaged, interesting one. And then you'll have something to sort of pick up. When the tutor comes once a week, when the tutor's gone, you can recall some of the words, you say them with the child. And letting children sort of have the upper hand there might be a good thing too. It's not quite the same, but I do know that there was one occasion in my life when I was sort of intensively immersing myself in Swedish, which just came to me. It's like, oh my gosh, I understand this language and I don't know how to speak it, but I can understand it. So with whom do I dare to speak it? I found children, little children. So I was on a train and I just found little children, and didn't have the confidence to speak to adults, but I felt fine. And they don't judge you in the slightest. They don't, are at all cognizant of mistakes and the like. And so it's a very free, fun, friendly environment. I think learning languages in general is best done when it's a fun thing. You don't need to see it as labor if you enjoy the process. So you can make it a way of playing with your children. I would say that would be a good way to do it. Just bite the bullet and say, I want my child to know this. I should know it then. I don't know it. Let's learn it together. And I'll do what it takes to learn